Well, I came upon a child of God. He was walking along the road, and I asked him, tell me, where are you going? He told me. Said, I'm going down to Yasna's farm, gonna join in rock and rollin'. Got to get back to the land that set my soul free. We are stardust, we are ghosts, we are billion-year-old carbon, and we got to get ourselves back to the garden. Where they cannot walk beside you, I have come to lose the small, and I feel myself to be a car, something turning. Maybe it's the time of year, yes, and maybe it's the time of year, and I don't know when the light is for burning. We are stardust, we are ghosts, we are billion-year-old carbon, and we got to get ourselves back to the garden. We are stardust, we are dust, we are billion-year-old carbon, and we got to get ourselves back to the garden. By the time we got to Woodstock, we were having a strong, and everywhere was a sun and a celebration. And I dreamed I saw the burning death flames riding shotgun in the sky, turning into butterflies above our nation. We are stardust, we are dust, we are caught in the devil's bargain, and we got to get ourselves back to the garden. Find the cost of freedom buried in the ground. Mother Earth will swallow you, lay your body down. Find the cost of freedom buried in the ground. Mother Earth will swallow you, lay your body down.
Good morning. Today is Wednesday, August 15th, 2019 AD. This is Uncle Benny's Creepy Campfire Stories, the Sludge Report project. Winding down as I intend to wrap this up maybe September 5th. Make it a full 3 months of doing this exercise. We'll see how it goes, taking it a day at a time. Find the cost of freedom. Yeah. There's one who paid the price of our freedom, and that is Christ, who died for our sins to set us free from sin and death, who redeems us from hell and destruction, gives us life eternal. He paid the price for your freedom and my freedom. Well, today is the 50th anniversary of what is known as Woodstock, and I hope you enjoyed that song and the little video. Who knows, maybe there'll be a copyright claim. Hopefully they don't suspend the video. What a hassle. Song written by Joni Mitchell, performed there by Crosby, Stills, Nash, and he was Young in there? I'm not sure. Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young were at Woodstock, and any rate, great song, and I want to talk about that briefly. This is the 50th anniversary, the official 50th anniversary, which booked the likes of Miley Cyrus and other ilk. Fell through and was canceled, but there are various things going on in Bethel Woods, Yazger's Farm, which is where the original Woodstock was held. So that's happening. That's going on. I've kind of followed some things on social media about it, and it's just interesting, the generation, many of those that were there, and how they glorify it. And it's kind of sad. You can tell things haven't turned out like they thought. I want to talk about that a minute. So, and again, welcome to Uncle Benny's Creepy Campfire Stories. I am your host, Uncle Benny, and we are going to talk about a few things, some news articles, and just the same old. I'm kind of running out of steam with going over some of the same old things. I've made my witness, and anyway, let me just go ahead and close this out here. So, I want to talk about the hippie generation, and brought to a vicious and sad close with the alleged Manson murders and all of that going on. You say alleged. What are you talking about? Well, it's a lot of weird stuff surrounding that whole situation. But at any rate, let's just go with the assumption that, anyway, it ended with the Manson family murders of the LaBiancas, and then all those on Cielo Drive. Anyway, what was all that about? Hippie generation, Woodstock. Well, where's it led us? There were quite a number of people there, and it wasn't all sunshine and unicorns. There were some babies born. Some people died. One young man was run over by a tractor in his sleeping bag. You don't hear about that. I was disappointed. I watched a recent kind of documentary on it that had a lot of information about the origins of how that all came together in advance with Woodstock. And at the end, I watched the full credits just to see, because they listed all the performers, artists who had died, even up to very recent. So it's a very new documentary. I can't remember the name of it all of a sudden, but I was watching for the name of at least that young man who died in the tractor. He died. No, he wasn't important. He was, they didn't mention that. Only people like Richie Havens, which, I like Richie Havens. Don't get me wrong. Great performer, great artist. But anyway, what was it all about? Peace, love, and freedom? It's easy to look back and glorify something like that. And it was remarkable. It is remarkable. Remarkable event. But what was the hippie movement all about? So anyway, I just want to direct your attention, or make you aware of a video you could watch. Let me just read the description here. This is G. Edward Griffin's shocking video interview of Soviet subversion of the free world press. Now, when we talk about Soviet subversion, especially in the context these days of Russian collusion and almost resurrecting the Cold War, Russia's the bad guy, we've got to understand, back in the days of Stalin, the Bolsheviks, and all this, who really was behind it? Well, I gave you some good reading material yesterday to look into it. let's just say Talmudus. Talmudus. You extrapolate that out, what that means, okay? Soviet subversion of the free world, where he interviews ex-KGB officer and Soviet defector Yuri Bezmenov, who decided to openly reveal KGB's subversive tactics against Western society as a whole. Oh, you know what? Can't avoid it. It's in the description. I have to say it. Bezmenov explains how Jewish Marxist ideology is destabilizing the economy and purposely pushing the U.S. into numerous crises so that quote-unquote big brother tyranny can be put into place in Washington. How most Americans don't even realize they're under attack. Now, that's just not economically and in the government. It's morally. It's the youth in the government re-education camps. And that normal parliamentary procedures will not alter the federal government's directions. He then explains how Marxist leaders use informers to make lists of anti-communist and other politically incorrect people they want to execute once they, actually a Jewish oligarchy, come to power. How many dual Israeli citizen Zionists, by the way, do we have in prominent positions of power in Washington? One of my videos, I looked it up and we looked at that. The oligarchs' secret lists include civil rights activists and idealistically minded, useful idiot leftists as well. So what does that mean? That means people who think they're doing, liberalism and leftists and all this a favor, even like Antifa. They're useful idiots, and when they'll be surprised to find out when it's all said and done, they'll be some of the first against the wall and shot. Figuratively speaking, literally, but figuratively speaking. However, they're done away with. Doesn't necessarily mean they'll be shot. There's other ways. There's lots of ways to kill a cat. Bezmenov provides several real-world examples of how Marxist leaders even execute or imprison each other. He explained how American embassy employees were known to betray Soviets attempting to defect, how existed a triangle of hate. You know, Satan's kingdom opposes itself. That's, and I've mentioned it several times, that God confounds the wicked. That's how we can be confident when we see a lot of these tells, a lot of these indications there's something rotten in Denmark and some of these news stories that we're being shown. You know, be confident. The Lord confounds the plans of the wicked. They overplay their hand. They're revealed, okay? And why he realized that Marxist-Leninism was a murderous doctrine, how the CIA ignored or didn't care about communist subversion. He also mentions that revolutions throughout history are never the result of a majority movement, but of a small, dedicated, highly organized group who seize power. Next, he explains how the American mass media spreads lies about life in the Soviet Union. Anyway, go ahead, and the link will be in the description. It's an hour and 21 minutes. It's from 1984. It's kind of like dull looking. You know, it's not an extravagant set. It's pretty static, just an interview. But the information I think you'll find fascinating. If you have a heart for the truth, if you want to know what is really going on. This is one of those indications. Next, I want to direct your attention to a book. Now, this has to do with rock and roll, starting way back in the 60s. Laurel Canyon is where a lot of these groups came out of. Hey, I love a lot of music that came out of these groups in Laurel Canyon. I do like it. But we also have to recognize the spirit that can be, the influence it can have. What are the fruits of it? Has it ruined people's lives? Has it led them astray? Has it fueled rebellion? Has it basically been an echo chamber for wicked ways that are in all of us, you know? But there's more to it than that. And that's what this book is about. Now, this guy, David McGowan, shortly after this book was published and he went around being interviewed and promoting it, suddenly died of lung cancer very quickly. Died of cancer very quickly. Kind of weird. And also, the book, I will say, I have read this book. There are interviews. If you don't want to read the book, you can listen to them. But I recommend reading the book. You may be able to get an audio book on. Yeah, I think there's an audio book. But he alludes to a lot of things without, he sort of like lays out the evidence, circumstantial and otherwise. But it's not like he makes strong. He doesn't assert the conclusions directly. That's what I will say. So you can read it and make your own judgments, but it's, once again, a phrase I like to use, puzzle and evidence. Okay? Let me just read this to you. Laurel Canyon in the 1960s and early 70s was a magical place where magic's an operative word. Hollywood, magic, Laurel Canyon, magic, where a dizzying array of musical artists congregated to create much of the music that provided the soundtrack to those turbulent times. Bands like the Byrds, Buffalo Springfield, Monkees, Beach Boys, Mamas and Papas, Turtles, the Eagles, Flying Burrito Brothers, Frank Zappa, the Mothers of Invention, Steppenwolf, Captain Beefheart, Crosby, Stills, Nash, Three Dog Night, Alice Cooper, The Doors, Love with Arthur Lee, Joni Mitchell, Judy Collins, James Taylor, Carole King, Jackson Browne, Judy Sill. If you've never heard of her, she's actually, she was really good, but she's the artist you never heard of. David Blue lived together and jammed together in a bucolic community nestled in the Hollywood Hills. Very small community, and all of this talent congregated came out of there with all these hits and everything that really drove a generation. But there was a dark side to that scene as well. Many didn't make it out alive. The deaths shrouded in mystery. That's true. Far more integrated into the scene than most would care to admit was a guy by the name of Charles Manson, along with his murderous entourage. Also floating about the periphery, this is where it gets interesting, were various political operatives, up-and-coming politicians, and intelligence personnel. The same sort of people who just happened to give birth to many of the rock stars populating the canyon. What does that mean? It means that a lot of these artists were sons and daughters of some very interesting military characters. And all of the canyon's colorful characters, rock stars, hippies, murderers, and politicos, happily coexisted along a covert military installation. So, if that piques your interest, I would urge you to read it. Links in the description. Okay. Now, some of these, we could go through the usual. There's a lot of nonsense stories in here. They just to waste your time, break your focus. Oh, it's interesting, it's curious, and what a strange world we live in, but, like man dead after taco eating contest. Next, click on that if you want, right? Motorists playing Pokemon Go on 8 phones simultaneously. Mini horses not allowed to fly. I mean, this is a serious news site, right? But is it really that far removed from, like, the National Enquirer? Standing in the checkout line. I mean, come on. Wakey, wakey. Wake up and smell the coffee. Look at it this way. They're making fun of you. Your time is worth these ridiculous stories they bring from the far corners of the earth. Oh, and they mix it in with other things to give it an air of importance or to, fatten up the newspaper. Who knows? But what it comes down to is that your time is precious, and choose wisely. It's easy to click on links. Hey, I do it. I read stuff that is like, why did I bother? Why did I do that? Why did I watch that video? It was a waste of my time. Just nonsense. Yes, we do need diversions, right? We do need diversions. Not everything has to be heavy lifting. Don't get me wrong. But again, we're here to talk about what is presented to us on a daily basis, 24 hours, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. What's called news, and it's not news, or it's lies, or it's spin, it's propaganda, it's mind control. It is being used to, it's the art of misdirection. Anyway, we talk about this all the time. Scaramucci accuses Trump of mentally declining. The only thing I really want to talk about this article is just, this is MSN. Colby Itkowitz. Never heard that last name. Stephanie Grisham, in her first television interview since becoming White House press secretary, was forced to defend. Okay, hang on a minute. Grisham dismissed Scaramucci, who held her job in the Trump administration for 11 days. The antecedent to her is not Grisham. It's Scaramucci. Now, is this just a typo? Is this just, made a mistake? Yeah, probably, maybe. But this is professional level journalism. We get this all the time. They're phoning it in. If they didn't have the guy's name, Colby Itkowitz, on here, I would have thought that this was, they hired people in India or whatever, that they write the articles and they use voice recognition software, because sometimes if you look at translation software, they'll confuse the pronouns for he, she, and they. Anyway, I just thought that was interesting. You know, that kind of stuff jumps out at me. Does it jump out at you, or does it just go right by you? Well, don't miss a trick. Try not to miss a trick, because there's lots of tricks, right? That's what this is what the Sludge Report's all about. All right, just briefly on this. Could the next sin tax fall on red meat? What about this? Well, meat could be a target for higher taxes given criticism of the industry's role in climate change. That means cow farts. That means when you're driving out in the country and you go by a farm, you know, those cows are just, they must have had Taco Bell for lunch or something. They're farting away, and they're that's why you have to have the air conditioning on, because of global warming, because the cows are farting. Think it through. That's a real serious argument. Deforestation and animal cruelty, according to a report by Fitch Solutions Macro Research. Well, the industry's role in climate change, deforestation, animal cruelty, that's arguably a false premise. Yes, there is animal cruelty that goes on. There are horrible conditions that go on. Deforestation, maybe in Brazil. Okay, but anyway, let's see here. So what it comes down to is not just about that, the environmentalist stuff, but it's about combating obesity and, let's see here. Taxes on meat and sugar have long been controversial. Prime Minister Boris Johnson suggested he would abolish the UK's drink tax on sugary drinks. See, they tax your sugary drinks over there like an excise type of tax, because it's to combat obesity. Just like in New York. I don't know if that ever became law. Did it become law that you can't have supersized drinks? What happened to personal accountability, responsibility? Well, the more of these, you know, the state knows best. Big Brother knows best, right? These are people who wish to be gods over you. And one way that they manifest that is telling you what you can and cannot do, what you can and cannot have, even down to the ridiculous. They do your thinking for you. Now, granted, there are people who don't think and they are obese and they do just drink, but is taxing and making it more expensive, does that fix it? I mean, this stuff is not thought through. But it really isn't even about that. What it's about is subjugation, humiliation, belittling human beings, and making them like infants. That they're the babies, and the state is mom and dad, and God, really. Okay, so enough about that, I guess. Meat industry has also been under fire after studies linked eating too much red and processed meat to illnesses ranging from heart disease and cancer. Well, I think there's far more compelling evidence that the processed foods, the modified organisms, the starches, not starches, carbohydrates, which are sugars, which the American diet is loaded with. And I don't think I pulled it up, but I haven't pulled it up, but Chinese are fatter than ever because they're switching more to an American diet. This came from, I watched something about if Chinese eat a lot of rice, how come they're so skinny? Well, the fact is they're not. They're having obesity problems because they've switched to American type of diet, by and large. And what is an American diet? Well, high in processed foods and sugars, right? Eating too much meat. Now, I'm not going to quibble too much about processed meat, because if they're talking about bologna and some of these meats that are loaded with all kinds of preservatives and things like that, sure, okay. But red meat gives you heart disease and cancer? Well, you think so because you've been told that, just like you've been told the incredible edible egg is bad for you. But then they've switched their mind on that. Well, look into it, right? You're just going to take the studies from Scientismus and let that rule your life. Do your own homework. A meat tax. emerged as a policy sibling to the sugar tax, supported on the basis that meat does play a role in a balanced diet, but overconsumption is a public health issue. Well, it only becomes a public health issue, really, when you're pointing the gun at people and telling them you have to pay for other people's bad choices. Okay, moving on. All right, this is, aren't you liking how fast we're going this morning? We'll be done, okay? Now, this story, I saw this last night. It was live going on. The guy hadn't been taken into custody. Let's call it an alleged story. We need to. Why? 6 officers hurt. Now, last night, we didn't know anybody was dead. It sounded like 6 officers had all been shot, and I think they were, but none of them died, and I don't even know that any of the wounds were grazed or not as serious, which, again, if this really happened, good. I'm glad no one was really hurt that badly, that people got to go home to their families. Police officers, even though I may make some comments in these videos, are human beings. I've referred to the jackboots. Well, obviously that means the policy enforcers are probably going to be your police or, your police type of law enforcement. And they're human beings. God loves them. He died for them. And unfortunately, too many of them, let's just say it that way, too many of them are maybe in the job for the wrong reasons. Too many of them are not really versed in constitutional protections. I don't call them rights anymore. I call them protections, constitutional protections of your God-given rights. Okay, that's the proper way to express it. Our history, and too many of them really believe the lie of, I'm just following orders. And that's how, for example, if you watch what's going on in Hong Kong right now, or even, you could look back, there's a documentary about what happened in Tiananmen Square 30 years ago, and the students are, the officers in the Chinese army, which are trying to quell the dissent, young people in, their Chinese army uniforms, their fellow Chinese, the same age, their peers are telling them, you are Chinese too, you are just like us, and many of the officers were sympathetic, but so many of them can't break out of, I have to follow orders or I'll be in trouble. Don't be a sheeple, don't be a follower. Stand up for what's right. Even if it costs us, we have to stand, because we're the one that's got to die when it's time for us to die. And we're the ones who are going to have to answer to our maker. Not to the guy, who's barking orders at us, all right? So, suspect in custody after 6 officers hurt an hours-long Philadelphia standoff. Now, all of the wounded officers were released from the hospital, and apparently this guy was served a narcotics warrant, and that's why he went nuts. Now, is that really what happened? Was it narcotics? Okay, we'll just take that. But remember, he had all this ammo, all these guns, and we're going to get into that in a second. Or maybe they were there to confiscate his guns. Just don't know. Well, why would they lie to it? Well, really? Are you really going to even ask that question? Yeah. So we don't know. We're told it's narcotics warrant. An armed suspect accused of opening fire and wounding 6 officers. Now, why would somebody, he could be drug-addled. He could be psychotic, demon-possessed, all these things. Why would if someone's serving a narcotics warrant, who knows exactly what the scope of that was, what kind of sentence, maybe it was possession, was it a small amount, big amount, distributing? What was the deal with that narcotics warrant? We don't, horrible journalists, they got 4 journalists on this, Doa Madani, Tom Winter, Phil Helsel, and Carly Rasner. And we don't get any more details on this narcotics warrant. That's all it is. Narcotics warrant. Warrants, plural here. Okay, well, what were they? What were the real charges? Because this guy obviously thought it was worth this kind of carnage or potential carnage and risking his life and going to jail for the rest of his life versus just going in peacefully and dealing with narcotics charges. So that to me is a little bit, I need more answers, don't you? Or maybe not. Maybe just, open your mouth, in comes the airplane with this food, and just down the hatch. I don't know how that little song goes when you try to get a baby to eat, but, think about it. How many people get the news like, okay, open the hangar doors, in comes the airplane, and just, good baby, just swallow what they tell you, okay? Shortly after midnight, police spokesman tweeted that a suspect was in custody and they were clearing the house. Okay. So they're serving a warrant. Gunmen opened fire. There were officers trapped upstairs for hours. So I don't really understand the whole deal, why they had so many officers in the building securing the building for this guy. Then, in my opinion, if you're going to someone's door and they're that dangerous to arrest them, there maybe ought to be a better plan. That's just an aside. Again, I'm an armchair analyst here. I don't really know what all the details, but it just, the journalist isn't asking that question. Why were there officers all over the building securing the building? They say later on they were securing the building. Why? If this guy was that dangerous and they knew that, now why didn't they wait until the guy went out to Starbucks somewhere and tackled him in a parking lot? You know what I mean? All the officers shot had been released. Okay. Of course, they mentioned one of the officers, who's the father of 2 boys, suffered a graze wound to his head and could have been killed. Anybody could have been killed, no matter where they were shot. Okay, why am I saying that? Well, watch out for the emotional components. That's, again, this Uncle Benny's Creepy Campfire edition, Sludge Report edition, is about sort of reading the news with a critical eye and recognizing the mind control spin, propaganda, all that stuff. Why do they need to throw this in? See any more special than the other guys that were shot? Maybe they're father of 4 girls, Maybe they got grazed, in a love handle. Well, a couple inches over could have got him right in the liver. What's the point? Why is this in there? I always say, well, I don't always say it, but I've said it many times. There's nothing, whether it's pictures or words, that they don't put in your face for a reason. Okay. All right. So the guy called an attorney, and he's saying that he wanted to figure out a way to, without any further violence coming to himself, anyone else or himself. Okay. So he was panicking, trying to figure out, how do I get out of this situation alive? I don't know the situation of why he started this off to begin with, if he's that afraid for his life. If you're going to start shooting for hours and shooting at police officers, you really are basically saying, this is my last stand. You're going to have a change of mind at that point. After you've already done that, or are you going all the way? Well, I guess some people will change their mind. But said he arrived at the home and was allowed to wear body. I mean, I don't know how bright this guy is or anything. So, and nothing surprises me. People are capable of all kinds of things, good or bad, or irrational as well. So, nevertheless, reading this with a critical eye. It's like ask questions like, what's going on here? All right, so let's just get down to the real nitty gritty. Okay. Hang on a minute. This was a narcotics warrant that went awry almost immediately, and the officers came under fire. Officers were in different areas of the building to quickly secure it, and some became trapped upstairs. Okay, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they weren't in there to begin with. They entered the building after all the gunshots happened to secure. They went in to secure the building. I don't know. Officers took cover behind cars and blocked off surrounding streets. They were fired upon by the unidentified shooter. Police returned fire. Just about every officer came under fire at some point. Let's see here. Police have not said what kind of weapon or weapons the gunman was firing. But get a load of this, okay? This is where we get one of the things that makes this story suspect in the light and context of everything. Now remember, I said we might start getting more frequently, or at least back-to-back type of mass shootings. Well, this was a mass shooting. Did anybody die? It wasn't a mass murder, but it clearly could have been. Okay, so Philadelphia Mayor Jim Kenney said the suspect has a criminal history and, quote, was able to get these weapons in a large magazine, a large amount of bullets. The mayor criticized federal and state governments for what he said was a lack of progress on gun control and an unwillingness to stand up to the NRA and others. So whether it's our 6 officers that were shot or it's some 15, 17, 20-year-old kid on the streets of Philadelphia who gets shot with guns that shouldn't be in people's hands, it's aggravating. It's saddening. It's just something we need to do something about. Our officers deserve to be protected, and they don't deserve to be shot at by a guy for hours with an unlimited supply of weapons and an unlimited supply of bullets. Well, I think the officers are protected. They have full body armor. They got military gear and armored vehicles, and they've got they've got everything. They got tear gas. They've got all kinds of weapons. They've got your they've got military grade rifles. You know, all these kinds of things. But I get what he's saying. He's saying that, well, they don't want anybody who's got equal firepower. But that's not our country. Now, should this guy have had that kind of weapon? Clearly not. If the story is true, the guy's just, unhinged and he's, gonna gun down authorities. But again, let's be honest about it, okay? Was that really the proper way to? The guy has a criminal history. Is this the first time he was ever violent? Is the first time he was ever known to have weapons? We don't know. This horrible journalism by 4 individuals, 4 people. What's the point? Is the point about this story? No, it's about the lies, the spin, the propaganda, the nonsense we're given. The story is got more information about gun control, really, than it does anything else worthwhile, okay? Now, I want to draw your attention to this picture. I don't know if these fellows are vested. So these are police officers responding to the shooting, right? I don't know if they're vested. And that's what I mean is, what I mean by that, are they wearing bulletproof vests? But they don't have any riot gear or helmets on, or, the one officer got grazed in the head. Well, I don't know if there's bulletproof helmets, but, you see SWAT people wearing certain helmets. These guys are walking around with these kind of weapons, right? Look how he's holding it. The strap is loose. He's barely got 3 fingers wrapped around it. His thumb appears to be even on the wrong side. What happens if he drops that? Is that guy really a police officer? Now you might say, oh, that's crazy. I don't know. But he ought to be embarrassed for how he's carrying this weapon. This guy isn't much better. But maybe his thumb's behind it. I don't know. It almost looks like his thumb is on the wrong side. He's pressing it to his body with the 3 fingers. That kind of looks like his thumb right there. But at any rate, these are the kind of things. Don't miss a trick, right? Do I know if this guy's a real officer? Are they wearing bulletproof vests or not? I don't know. But let's give them the benefit of the doubt and say they are. What's this? Why is he holding it as weapon so improperly? That would be public safety issue. Drop that gun and it goes off. Well, the safety was on. Okay, whatever. It's, again, just you got to pay attention to this stuff. This may be too detailed for you, but the devil's in the details. Remember that. Okay, so there you go. Oh, I want to bring up the other part about this, about the daycare. Of course. There was this happened nearby a daycare. Just a minute. Maybe I read that somewhere else, but apparently it was, or maybe it's been taken out. But this happened like really close to a daycare where there were 80 children there. Really, I don't know what time this all happened. Let's see, Wednesday afternoon. Okay, yeah, I didn't hear about it until the evening, so maybe there were still children in the afternoon. I think it was later in the afternoon, but those are the kind of details that I want to hammer out. So it was the daycare. What time was the warrant served? 4:30? 5 o'clock. Okay, maybe daycare goes until, people get off work. So, all right, I don't know. But those are the kind of questions I like to ask. Where is, I think this is funny. This happened in Nicetown neighborhood. I didn't see that before. Smallville, USA. Happened in Nicetown neighborhood. Happened about 4:30 p.m. Okay, so now we know a little bit closer when the thing was served. All right, so there may have been people in the daycare still. Nicetown neighborhood. Could be like any town, USA. That's kind of interesting. I'm not saying there's not a Nicetown neighborhood over there. There's not a borough or whatever it is called Nicetown, but it's curious. You remember, I look for the data points. Why are there always little weird things? Mayor comes out. They don't know what type of weapon it is, but he's already got it determined. He's got unlimited ammo, unlimited weaponry, and why aren't there other protections so our officers don't have officers with children and you see the picture I'm painting here? Guy comes out and starts blowing the bullhorn about gun control. Our officers deserve to be protected. Who wouldn't agree with that, right? It's kind of like one of those things that's like, how would you go against that? But is that the way to protect them? Or actually using your brains and trying to arrest this guy or serve a warrant if he's dangerous in a much more, a different setting, different tactic? Take some responsibility for that. Why isn't there any question by the journalists? Is like police did not decline to answer when asked if there is going to be a change in procedure of how warrants are served and people with known criminal backgrounds like this. Again, we don't know what the criminal backgrounds are. Maybe that'll come out a little later. All right, I'm not seeing where it was, but this happened near a daycare. But what I want to bring attention to is the Wounded Knee Massacre of December 29th, 1890. So I'm not an expert on Wounded Knee, but the bottom line is that, first of all, I want to point out that picture again. See these guns? I don't know if they're M1s, AR-15 type of weapon. This is a type of gun that you'll see a big scary image of it when there's a mass shooting and the public needs to have these bans. This would be like an assault rifle, right? But the police get to have them. Never forget that. Why do we have the right to bear arms? It's not for hunting. It's not for stopping someone from coming in your house or taking your property and trying to take your life. It's not for target shooting, skeet shooting. It's not for just foreign invaders. No, it's to protect against tyranny. It's to be a buffer against tyranny. So while not every American needs to have an anti-aircraft gun in their backyard, we can't be reduced to registered rifles only fit for shooting quail and maybe CO2-powered squirrel guns. If you're going to arm your police and the policy enforcers, basically the government, if you're going to arm them with that kind of weaponry, then the citizenry needs to have commensurate ability to stand up to that. Otherwise, and that's what's trying to happen. That's what this is all about, is taking guns away, and maybe not on the mass scale, as I've mentioned before, but taking it away from the people who understand why they have those kind of guns, understand tyranny, and who have in their hearts, give me liberty or give me death, and they'll follow through with that. So the Wounded Knee Massacre is a domestic massacre, meaning on the U.S. soil, several hundred Lakota Indians. So about upwards of 200 to 300 Indians were killed, and I'm just going to break it down for you. You can look into it. I'm not an expert on this, but basically, there was an Indian problem. That's what they called the Indian problem, and they wanted the Indians to give up their weapons. Well, they didn't want to do that, and when the government was trying to take their guns, there's different stories as to how it all got started off, but in the end, the government soldiers the policy enforcers were trying to take their weapons, and they wouldn't let them. And they had already given up a lot of their weapons. One of the Indians refused to give it up because he said he paid a lot for that rifle. And anyway, there's a Miniconju, a Lakota Sioux chief, lies dead in the snow. Oh yeah, it's black and white, but the older I get, the more real these pictures look, and the less ancient they seem. On daybreak on December 29th, Forsyth ordered the surrender of weapons and the immediate removal of the Lakota from the zone of military operations to awaiting trains. Search of the camp confiscated 38 rifles, and more rifles were taken as the soldiers searched the Indians. None of the old men were found to be armed. Anyway, so, in these kind of situations, stuff happens accidentally, one side or the other. Either way, once it gets kicked off, it doesn't stop. And all these Indians were massacred. And it all had to do with them taking their guns. Look into, I don't need to tell you, but do you think about it? The same forces. Now, remember that video I told you about, that KGB agent just talking about the subversive techniques and how it's basically an internal takeover. Look into it. And look about, Stalin, Pol Pot, all the people who've taken the arms away from the people. The next thing you know, there's mass slaughter. And I know you don't believe it can happen, down next to your local Kroger's or at the mall or in your neighborhood that's, well-manicured lawns and sprinklers and children riding their colorful bikes on a Saturday. You don't think it can happen. You're wrong. You're deceived, and you're deluding yourself. You better believe this thing is real. Helter Skelter, man. It's coming down fast. It's all coming down. Unless you start opening your mouth, you start understanding your individual rights, your power as an individual, your God-given freedom, and spend a little more time on that than you do on your football games, your baseball games, your basketball games, your golf game, your country club, your sitcoms, your movie nights. Now, am I against any one of those things specifically? No, there's a place for every little thing, but whether you're out of balance or not. If you're convicted in your heart, if you're annoyed at me right now, then you probably do have a problem. Meaning I'm right and you're part of the problem. So there you go. Make a great day. Uncle Benny signing off.